YouTube page. The Council for the Town of St. Mary's acknowledges with gratitude and respect that we are gathering on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse, giving thanks for all creation. I'll begin this morning with declarations of pecuniary interest, starting with Councillor Craigmile.
None.
Councillor Luna.
None.
Councillor Lucas.
None.
Councillor Pridham.
None.
And I have none. So next will be the amendment or approval of the agenda. Any issues with the agenda today, folks? Okay, seeing none, I see the recommendation that August 20th. All right, we'll start today with our report on the cemetery master plan. Long awaited. Thank you, boys.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is a strategic initiative that we undertook in 2024. I believe it was part of the 2024 capital budget. And then we had some delays with staff turnover and things like that. So we're finally finishing it. So better late than never. But originally when we decided to move ahead with the cemetery master plan, we were looking for that strategic guidance document for the cemetery. We suspected overall everything's in okay shape, but you know, as our business model is changing up there, cremations are obviously starting to lap full interments. We're getting requests for different services. We wanted to do an inventory of the site. We wanted something kind of strategically to guide the site for the next, 20, 25 years of operation. We went to RFP. We selected Plural Group, who has experience with many cemetery master plans. This is Sean Kelly. No relation to myself, to my knowledge. But stranger things have happened. Stranger things have happened. We have the cemetery master plan attached, and he's got a short presentation, and then after that, we'll take questions, and I have a staff report to kind of maybe guide the short-term and long-term directions. So, take her away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Really excited to have this plan done. As Jed has noted, it's taken a little while for us to get this to the point that we're comfortable bringing it in front of council, and I think we're in a really good place with this, and it's a really good piece, I think, for certainly for the town of St. Mary's. We can start the slideshow. And we're ready, Jenna. I'm going to advance the next slide. As we get going into this master plan, Jed's already touched on certainly on the purpose. Really, it's a guiding document that provides recommendations. These recommendations are really, founded on best practice, some engagement, certainly what we see in the community and at the sites. And really what we want to do is make sure that we provide something that certainly town decision maker staff and the residents can utilize. We had some outcomes for this, and what we really needed to do is get a deep dive in and understand the cemetery services as they stand right now. And the comprehensive plot plan that goes with it and the current cemetery layout. We want to deal with certainly how we move this beyond what we know of cemeteries of the past, and how do we become a little more inclusive? How do we increase accessibility? And these are people of all ages, abilities, backgrounds, interests, beliefs. What we're really pointing to, though, is a sustainable operation, the management and development of a plan, and that's physically and financially. These are big pieces in communities to manage. They take a lot of resources. In my experience, and I work with a lot of rural communities across the province, sometimes the resources aren't there. And at the end of the day, you want a well-designed space that allows future accommodation and certainly celebrating past legacy and cemetery heritage. Next slide, please. So, our deep dive includes a few things. Typically, we look at official plans. We certainly look at the Bereavement Authority of Ontario, their care guides, the information they may have, their requirements. What we also look into are the things that you would have online, certainly for yourselves, as far as town reports, plans, studies, legislation, other initiatives that may be concurrently going at the same time. There was a lot of documents that were provided to us. We went in, we summarized all these and see how they fit into the bigger scheme of things and where we were going with that. Next slide, please. We visited, obviously, the sites, the St. Mary's Cemetery land holdings, the interment spaces, access, egress. We look at circulation, we look at existing vegetation and operational structures. And I must say, my general impression is the cemeteries were very well managed certainly from an optics standpoint. When we went in there and looked around, they were certainly tidy, easy to get around, and all seemed to be in very good shape. Next slide, please. So a few things, other things we noticed, and I already talked about how it was well maintained. We noticed that there's multiple buildings on site, cemetery office, chapel, maintenance buildings. There's multiple forms of wayfinding and signage, and wayfinding, I'm using that term loosely right now. The roads seem to be in adequate shape. You know, some minor work had happened there. We had a combination of asphalt and gravel internal roads on site. But there seemed to be some appreciation for some public use of the cemeteries, pathways for passive recreation. We did see dog walkers and joggers and people using the site. The community garden located on the northwest side or end of the property in the future expansion lands speaks to the fact that, you know, this community embraces other uses within cemetery lands. We see that personally as a good thing. There's stewardship, there's eyes on the facility, and those seem to be the more positive cemeteries we go into. The site furnishing styles vary, we found, and that's probably due to incremental growth and who's doing what at what point, and that's pretty normal in most cemeteries we go into. Next slide, please. So we had an online public engagement survey. We had some engagement points, 154 participants. And what we're really trying to do is understand the level of satisfaction amongst the community, and insight on preferences. Cemeteries have different options and service opportunities. You can build it, you can hone in and be a little more strategic in how you want to offer them. So it's really important to understand what I would call the tone of the community and their acceptance level. We had some interviews, we had 6 community representatives, and really that's kind of more of a SWOT or strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats kind of approach to how they feel about the cemetery, and obviously staff questionnaires help. We talked about town staff as it relates to the cemetery, and we just want really insights on current operation, roles, and responsibilities. Next slide, please. So the master plan is a document that's about 7 sections. Obviously, we introduce it. We have an inventory. We have an engagement piece. We go through a site analysis. The big pieces, though, is anticipating change, and where we want to understand financial resourcing and then implementing the plan and the subsequent recommendations that go with it. It's a sizable document, not onerous, about 87 pages. But it's the last 2 chapters that most communities are really interested in, and there's a whole host of appendices that go with it. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go by section just to give you a glimpse, and you can see a bit of a graphic what's in each of the sections. The introduction is really you know, the project overview for us. It sets up the project, and for the subsequent sections that are coming in behind, we have a land acknowledgement, obviously, but we just really talk about what we're trying to achieve with this document. Next slide. We should go back 1. There we go. So we went and went to the cemeteries. We look at statistics, site inventory, and the interment configuration. I think the quick statement I would say is that St. Mary's has loads of land for its cemetery. Currently, I feel very comfortable that you're well positioned for the next couple of decades easily with the land base I'm saying. Certainly as I compare that to other communities that might have not as much land aligned to the cemeteries, where they have to start thinking about that, and they start having to think purchasing land and those sort of things. I was really pleased to see how much land St. Mary's does have. And if you go through the document, you'll get into statistics, so you'll look at the inventory, and then you'll see the configuration, and what will identify in the configuration is those lands that actually have plot configurations that are being utilized, and then other plot configurations that are not being utilized at the current moment. Somewhat of a plan for them, but that allows us opportunity to build on that, those opportunities in those lands. Section 3 slide, next slide, please. So we move into the site analysis. This is really our opportunities and constraints, what we can do, what's going to be a bit of a problem if we're doing these types of things. But again, you know, I think for us, it was really more of a good news deal where we were able to look at the lands and say, you have a lot of lands, you have a lot of current infrastructure, roadway, a lot of healthy planting happening, commemoration areas and monuments, very good shape. So I believe at the end of the day, that engagement, that site analysis piece was really just telling what was there, and was a good news story. Section 5. This is where we anticipate change. So we want to look at cemetery quality, we want to embrace those and sort of bring those to the forefront. But we do want to guide improvement as well, and looking at the improvement points that we may be interested in, or the community may be interested in. Enhancing identity for the town, enhancing movement within cemeteries is always an important thing. We also demonstrate through conceptual work what a concept could be going forward. Now, these are demonstrations. It's what it could be like. It doesn't necessarily mean 20 years it's going to be like that. The difficult part of master plans and the type of work we do is that most master plans are snapshots in time. They're snapshots in time on today's current issues and those needs too. So what we want to make sure is that when we're doing the work, that we provide some intent going forward, so you actually have a bit of a baseline. You understand the types of things you can do in the cemetery. But if it changes 10 years from now, it would not hurt my feelings, but you got to do what's best for your community. And what this document does is really set that up. Even though it's a master plan, it's strategic. So there are things in here that are built in that when you get into the recommendations, when you get into resourcing and getting things in a good, happy spot for you, you might make some decisions that deviate a bit from the current concept that we find today on August 25th. That's quite fine. Again, it's a what it could be like in the future type demonstration. Next slide, please. So financial resourcing. So, you know, building out a real cemetery finance plan was important. We need to look at perceptual care funds or annual care and maintenance funds. One of the things that weren't really done in St. Mary's, in the town, was the forecasting of the right demand interment mix. And that's a bit of a moving target always. We think about in-ground burials, cremation, columbarium, and then it kind of stops. There's other options out there, and there's a whole list of services that cemeteries can offer outside of interment that are actually added revenue stream opportunities, if I may. So trying to forecast that, get the right mix for St. Mary's might be a bit of a trial and error piece. All we can do is suggest these are the types of things you could consider, should look at, and make sure that that you follow through. It's important because when you're looking with that PCF or perpetual care fund, the annual maintenance fund, you want to ensure that you have the dollars in place to do that and the resourcing's at hand. So we want to target the adequacy of that and make sure anything that we're doing from a revenue standpoint happens. The other piece is competitive price mixing. Folks looking for opportunities at cemeteries are actually comparison shoppers these days. They will. They don't, just because they live in your town doesn't necessarily mean they're going to use your own cemetery. They might, and there's advantages to it, and most people don't think that way. And certainly with the, what I would say, the privatization of the cemetery sector, We have municipal, or public sector cemeteries. We also have private sector cemeteries. And they're kind of coming to a piece now where, you know, matching services to services is a little more competitive than it may be. And people do shop around. So having a competitive price analysis, understanding what, you know, local communities and other cemeteries, maybe in a regional sense actually, have out there is really important. So that allows us then to develop a cemetery revenue and an expense kind of tally for that, and then provide some price recommendations. So that financial resourcing chapter speaks to that. Next slide, please. So the final slide is really implementing the plan and its recommendations. The recommendations, 4 themes, really 14 actions bundled into those 4 recommendations. And these are things that we set up and believe are important over the next decade plus. But administration oversight was certainly the first bundle, if I can call it, or category of recommendations. The management of the perpetual care fund, really important. Another recommendation, we had some actions in that. The development and management and monitoring of interment options. It's amazing how many communities I go to really don't know what they've done in the last year. Monitoring is a really, really important piece, and understanding your needs. I've been to projects where they probably have months left of capacity, not knowing it because no one's really looked at it. And it just really depends on who you have resource to do that job. And if it's not part of that job description or wherewithal, it just hasn't happened. So it's really important to have the monitoring in place and looking at that management and development of it. And then, you know, we have a set of recommendations that talk about improving processes, procedures, and communications. Not to say that the communications, the website and everything that's happening on that, quite adequate in St. Mary's, but, you know, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, that's still happening, that's still at the forefront. There's a lot of interest holders of cemeteries these days, so we want to make sure they're all in the know, if I can call it that. Next slide, please. So, and this is just a summary. So you really have a 7-section document guiding cemetery decisions for the next decade and more. And we're looking really at administration, finance, operation, and physical evolution in meeting the needs of the town and the residents going forward. And I know this is a quick overview of the document. And I think I probably had a point, Jed, where we can open up for questions. I think the last slide is probably a thank you slide.
I will take this opportunity to pass the chair back to Mayor Strathy.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Questions from council? Councilor Pridham.
Kind of like a first question. In the historic sites, I see some of the capacity is like really, really low and opportunity. But there is, when you look at that, is there opportunity to use those spaces, or is it because it's historic, it's then written off?
Through the chair, the numbers are based on full interments because that's what we have to use. But there's always the opportunity, if you can prove the lineage, in that's like my great grandfather, that you could have a cremation placed on top. But as a baseline, we use the full interment. So when we say we have 115 years of capacity, that's based on full casket burials. So what we have to understand is, as the industry shifts, and, you know, we see more and more cremations, it's hard to project that. The other option is, if we do, you know, further in the staff report, if we do expand service offerings, like a scattering garden, or we added, there's also like cremation options you can add to headstones and things like that. So as the industry shifts to scattering gardens or cremated remains, the opportunities expand there. So yeah, so there is a potential there, but just so you understand, that's the way I read the report. It's based on full interments. So when you see those low numbers, but you still have to be able to prove the lineage so that you couldn't have, like, right now we don't allow any provisions for a stranger to be placed on top of an existing grave, right? So if my grandparents, the way I understand is I could be cremated and placed with my grandparents right now.
Okay, further questions? Councilor Craigmile.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things you mentioned, first, thank you for putting the plan together, because it's nice having everything in one place and seeing what is available. But I think it's not that important maybe today, but maybe in the future. You did mention that people are shopping. And I do believe that for out-of-towners, our fee for permit sites is extremely low. And I think it should be at the top of the category or something, just because I think in the future there will be a lot of shopping going on because other people don't have the land that we may have.
Sorry, through the chair. So Sean might clarify this for me, but the way I understand it, planners don't look at cemetery lands. So those fancy official plans and stuff like that, and they never look at your cemetery capacity. So as Sean's mentioned, people are shopping, and I think it's because they're coming out of the centers. So you're seeing more people coming out of the big cities, right? So I think that's going to be a reality of it, right? So it is recommended that we look at the external rate comparator, or the non-resident rate. But then once again, we should probably beef up the bylaw, how we do that confirmation, because it might be a little lacking there to make sure that it's a resident. Because the issue there is you could have had a resident that paid into the municipal tax system for 30 years and then went to Spruce Lodge for 5. And I would definitely consider them a resident, right? Like, you know, I would think that we would still, because there would have been 30 years that they were paying for the cemetery through their municipal taxes, in my opinion. So that's the piece you'd have to kind of beef up a little bit, how we figure that out. But yeah, absolutely. It is shocking that we do not include cemetery capacity in our bigger plans and things like that, so.
Councilor Brenham, yeah.
Yeah, I just have more like a question about the natural spaces for distributing ashes, or a garden space where you distribute ashes. And in the garden space, who tends the garden? Is it you know, people that have, you know, loved ones in the space? Is there a conflict? Is there, like, how is that managed?
Sorry, through the chair. So maybe if we would look at the staff report, we've kind of, Jenna and I have endeavored to boil down the 1 to 5 year goals. There are scattering gardens in operation. Stratford has one with a memorial wall. So we would have to answer all those questions, but we need to start with the bylaw first, and then we would have to figure out those SOPs. So the short answer is right now I don't have those answers. I don't know where it would be. I don't know where it would look like. As Sean has mentioned, he has put concepts. You could put it here, you could put it there. I have a vision that it would probably be somewhere in the south, but I do not have the SOP of how it's managed, what that looks like yet. But as we've mentioned, we need to start with the administrative, start with the bylaw revamp, and then we can start bringing those services online. So the short answer, I don't have an answer for you 100% right now, how that would look.
Councilor Luna?
Thank you, Worship. Did you look at a pet scattering area? I know that's been brought up to council before for pet ashes.
Through your worship, no, that was not part of the survey at hand. And because we're working through BAO, Bereavement Authority of Ontario, we're just dealing with human remains in this case. In saying that, however, lots of space and perhaps opportunity, if that's the will of the community, to create some space for that.
I apologize, I was late to the meeting, so if this was covered already, forgive me, but I just want to flip to page 18. And the East Ward Park Cemetery is a cemetery. Currently, we've had some issues, as you're aware, and we don't own the land. So one of the recommendations is that moving forward, the town of St. Mary's should explore feasibility of a repair process similar to precedent and commemoration monuments as a separate scope of work. What does that, number one, what's that mean? And number two, how would we pay for that? Because we have a situation where the churches have abandoned the property, so we'd be totally out of pocket for any work that happens there. And the question would be with the taxpayer, why should we pay for something where the churches have been clearly negligent?
Through your worship, that's an excellent question. So upon being to that site, you do know, and you know, you have a nestled corner or a cluster of monuments on a concrete slab. The condition is declined. In my opinion, needs to be tended to. The payment of that, however, at this point in stage, I don't believe you can go back to the churches and seek funds. I think it would be incumbent probably on the town to find a resource for that. And that's probably the best you're going to do.
Why wouldn't we go back on the churches? Because they fund all the time. They have reparation funds for all sorts of things. So what, you know, the suggestion that we should be totally out of pocket for it, because this could be a lot of money.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so through your worship, there's through the Cemetery Act, any of these, what I'm going to call historic and pioneer cemeteries do go back to the municipality. And in many situations, and I don't know right now, some of those churches may not even exist anymore. So obviously you're limited in getting anything from them. But in my opinion, I think it does rest with the town.
Okay, that's fair, but what are you thinking about in terms of costs? Are we talking about new monuments spread all over? Because it could be open-ended. What I would think would be appropriate might be respectfully different than what you think, because you're the expert, but what exactly are you thinking of? Because there's monuments that are in the corner, there's monuments where they've made just a place and so forth. Are you suggesting we should spread monuments over the whole property or construct something new to recognize? Because there is a plaque that exists that recognizes the situation, and the historical reality is the cemetery was abandoned. What would you suggest?
Well, through your worship, the way I understand the situation is the park is in our license right now through the BIO. So potentially, and someone might throw something at me, but you could put columbariums on the site, I believe, and add it online as another, that would create a revenue for the site and start a perpetual care if you wanted to isolate it. So.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about, and I can understand, I'm more concerned about what we should do with what's there. The suggestion in the report is that we should do something, and it's not very specific what it is. And what I'm saying is I don't want to endorse a report that suggests we spend a lot of money because it doesn't say in the report what we're going to do.
So, and Sean, I wouldn't talk to you about this, but I did have, when the monument repair people were in for the last contract, Clausen's, they're an expert in monument repair. They looked at the monuments that were there and they said that there's nothing that we can do with them. So like they said, what's there is there. So they said, just don't do anything with it. We can't take that apart. It is what it is. So they recommend not even touching it. So that was their professional opinion, was to just not.
Okay.
What's done is done, so to speak.
Okay. That's not what the report says, respectfully. So I think the report should clarify whether we're going to spend money or not, because the reality is that if the report, and again, I go back to the consultant and your expertise, it's written in there, you suggest we look at the feasibility of doing something. Doing what? And what kind of dollars are we talking about? Because I just want to leave it open-ended. I think that's a fair question.
Through your worship, I actually totally agree. And maybe Jed doesn't agree with me necessarily on this one. I think it's a responsibility of the municipality, the town, to actually get that monument corrected, because it's going to decline further. I don't think it's a good message to anyone or anything on allowing those things to decline. That's a legacy bet for the municipality. And despite having one group come in and look at that, I've been to other cemeteries where they've had similar situations and they've been able to retract, pull out monuments, repair monuments, and reset them on a new podium. And that's I believe in the document we're talking about, there should be some further analysis on the approaches to rectify.
Okay, that's a fair comment. I don't want to leave the impression that we're going to spend a lot of money on this, because there is still legal questions about who owns the property. And while I get it's our responsibility, I would say that the issue is very historic and very troubling in some respects. And it's a guessing game in terms of the monuments and where they would go, really. Councillor Luna.
Thank you. Just a comment about putting a columbarium in that park. My understanding is that there still remains anywhere in that park, so how do you put a columbarium on top of potential remains? Like, we can't do that, can we?
Yeah, and through the worship, I probably spoke out of turn, but the reality is there was a access road that was put in through there at one point, so part of it has been stirred. So, because there was an access road for.
Mr. Kelly, if I could add on to that, and only because I've had some confidential conversations with the BAO, that was something that has been suggested by the BAO actually, about the opportunity to look at maybe potential revenue options going forward. Again, we do not own the land today. We are waiting for the BAO to approve an action plan that would outline what we do next, if they approve that. But more importantly, if we were to investigate columbariums, we would go down the conversation with them that there was an access road. If we can prove it, would they allow us to add the columbariums on top of the existing concrete path today? Or do we have to investigate through ground penetrating radar in order to put up those monuments? So it's known to staff that we are in a holding pattern until we have further direction from the BAO, and then we can look at what we do with the monuments that are there today. As Mr. Kelly was stating, we have some monument companies who have suggested that we shouldn't touch those. If we were to remove the encasement of concrete on either area, they may completely disintegrate, degrade, and we can't fix it. So we would have to ensure that there is some sort of reference to commemorate who is there today, and we may very well have already done that with what exists. But a conversation would have to happen. Should we? Can we afford to? And have we already commemorated what has happened at that site?
Sorry, Ted, do you want to add anything to that? No. Yeah. Further questions? I had one more if I can. The whole, and again, I apologize if I missed it, but the whole situation about green burials, if you Google green burials, you get 10 different things. And so what does that mean in the report specifically, and what are you thinking of? Because when I read it, it talks about misinformation. So maybe what kind of misinformation is out there, and what do we as the town in endorsing this report see as a green burial?
So through your worship, I have put some thought behind that, and I think you're right. Green burial is a broad term. It can go as far as all implants, tooth fillings and stuff are removed from the body, and you're wrapped in cloth and you're placed in the ground with nothing. I think realistically, in application in St. Mary's, we would have to insist on a pine box. I've talked to other cemeteries that offer a green burial, but it's really like where their level of where they'll go. So for us, in our operation, the way we do things, the way that we can do things, it would be basically a pine box burial if we were to entertain it. But it'd much look like a traditional interment, just with a pine box. So there might be some idiosyncrasies we have to do around filling and things like for backfilling and things like that. But once again, I kind of go back to where we need to go in the next 5 years, and I think it's part of we need to revisit the bylaw. We need to look at our legislative issues. We need to get that house in order administratively, and then we need to get that house in order, and we need to get that bylaw modified. And then if we do allow that as part of the bylaw, then we have to build the SOP, what that looks like. But for us, I think it would be kind of an entry-level pine box interment.
Okay. If I can, has there been requests from the local funeral providers about green burials, and what do they think that is, or has there been a discussion with them? Because I understand they have been in favor of a scattering garden, and I've heard the word green burial thrown around, and again, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm not exactly sure what it means, to be quite frank.
You want to talk about survey, and then I'll talk about my conversation? Sure.
Through your worship, green burial is really burial without the casket as we know it, and without any concrete shroud as we know it. So the shroud you would use, as Mr. Kelly suggested, could be a pine box. It could be a wrap. It could be a cardboard box. There's all kinds of things that we're seeing. There's probably about eight communities across Ontario right now that do permit green burial, and I think you're going to see in the next year to 2 years, maybe 6 more coming. So it's becoming more and more on trend. These areas tend to be more naturalized than manicured, in my experience. Not to say there aren't a few out there that are manicured, but when you look at it, Mr. Kelly's talking about, what's the procedure that you want to operate a green burial site? Through the survey, what we were finding is that green burial probably was second to scattering garden on new initiatives for the town. Scattering gardens tended to have a little more traction with the community, and folks were seeking that. Green burial is very personal. And I think people want to comment generally, perhaps, and not so much personally on these things. But definitely scattering gardens were the way to go, and we felt that's the way to go. That's what we're seeing in we got 4 different cemetery master plans on the go right now. That's what they're pushing to. They're all asking about green burial, so you have to have some language necessary in the document for it. It will catch up at some point. I think you have a long time, loads of time before that's a real big thing for the town where we're located.
So would there be licensing requirements for that then, like from the BAO?
Yes.
So we would, sorry, to the worship, we would modify our bylaw, approve it here, and then the bylaw has to be approved at the BAO, and then we can bring those service levels offerings on. If you look at the staff report, I have flagged the scattering garden in the 1 to 5 year. I think the scattering garden, as Sean has mentioned, is probably the next thing that we need to do. In my conversation with the provider here, I said, well, if we offer this new low-cost thing, are we going to erode the services that we have? And he said, no. He said, Jed, the people that want individual interments are going to want individual interments. The people that want a monument and a full interment, they're going to want that. He said, but there's a lot of remains that are uninterred. They're sitting in closets, they're sitting on shelves, and he said, if we had a place where people can be interned, and I don't know what that looks like, sorry, I don't have the SOP, but if they can be interned, and then there was a record, so we have a record that Mr. Kelly was placed here, he lived here, this was his occupation, and then, probably the next step from a costing perspective would be if you wanted to have a memorial wall, right? So if you wanted to have that plaque or things like that, so I think that's probably the next step for us. Now, admittedly, that's a service level increase, so I hate to sound so crude about this, but it's probably an untapped market for our cemetery in that we don't offer it now, so people aren't doing it. As economic times get harder, that might be, as you're saying, people are shopping around. That might be somewhere we want to go. I envision the cost to be lower, but also the maintenance has to be much lower, right? So we're talking about a mulch flower bed, interment wall, but very low maintenance costs, so very low interment costs too, so.
Councilor Pridham?
I had another question around the scattering garden. Is there capacity for a space, or is it as many as you can put on?
Through your worship, there is no real capacity. There's no real capacity. It's a designated space. It's licensed. You have to have a burial permit. You can have the marker. You can have all kinds of things. It's the eco-friendly option. But a determined capacity is not there.
Councilor Liebman?
Thank you, Worship. Just along this line of scattering ashes, do we have and I don't know if it fits in with this conversation, but is there a bylaw that prohibits scattering ashes just anywhere? Like, does it have to be at the cemetery, or how do we deal with it?
I think you can do it.
Through your worship, the real gray zone, most municipalities do not have a bylaw to prevent the scattering of ashes almost anywhere. I'll leave it at that. You can imagine what that means. But I think it's really incumbent and really important to designate.
Further questions? Okay, anything we missed or that you want to add?
Sorry, through your worship, just I guess if we're looking at the staff report, Jen and I have put some thought into the 10-year outlook for the site. Really, it's the legislative things that we need to address, things that we're kind of lacking on as the software, the record keeping, digitization is the big thing for us. We're still very reliant on a paper system. So we're working on that. We've already started the works on that because it came out of this, and we started looking under opening files, and Jenna was so happy about it. And she's like, well, this is, so they've been already starting that process previously. So really, we're not asking for anything. It's just probably if you were going to like take a look at something, it's that 10-year outlook of what we're planning on doing at the site. Really, it's the front of house stuff that we need to focus on. The physical changes, I think, are kind of limited probably with once we had a bylaw revision would probably be our next thing. And then that's approved by AO. We could look at a scattering garden, and we'd bring somebody we'd probably bring Pearl back in to give us a design of what that would look like on the site. So, but overall though, I think we're in great shape. We are heavily reliant on new sales and interment fees for the budget right now. It's not really a problem. We have 115 years of capacity based on the full interments. That doesn't include the scattering of ashes. So, I don't want to leave it in such a way like they did 100 years ago. They got us the site, and there was great stewardship, and they, at Council of the Day knocked it out of the park. They really fixed it. But I think at some point you will reach a point where you're at capacity, and you're going to be left with just your perpetual care interest money to close your funding. So it's not really a problem for us right now. We are going to do what we can to close the operating budget, but just something that we have to keep in our back of our mind. But
Councillor Albert?
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just curious with regards to the records, are they all currently just physical, or are there any digital right now?
Jenna, can I get you to comment on that? It's
Are all the cemetery records currently physical? I know that's your favorite line of question.
It is. Of the active site, so Kane Street, every paper record that we have worked towards getting everything electronic. We are now trying to determine if we can remove the old historic paper records, and it is a process that continues. So the mapping is not necessarily digitized to specifically identify in certain plot who is interned at that site, and that would be part of this next administrative process so that we can make that public facing.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Okay, thank you both, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Kelly. Thank you for your presentation, much appreciated. So then the suggested recommendation was that PW 43-2026 Cemetery Master Plan report be received, and that the Strategic Priorities Committee recommends to Council that St. Mary's Cemetery Master Plan be adopted as presented, and that Council directs staff to bring forward a revised cemetery bylaw to include and address the recommendations detailed in the Cemetery Master Plan, and that Council directs staff to incorporate recommendations of the Cemetery Master Plan into future budget deliberations and annual department plans. Someone willing to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Luna, seconded Councillor Lucas. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 4.2, we have a presentation today with regards to pre-budget deliberations of Mr. Steckley, please.
Good morning, through the chair. I am pleased to present this report that marks the start of the 2027 budget process. The intent this year is to give the current committee and council the opportunity to share any input, priorities, or direction it wishes to pass forward into the process. As this will be the first budget cycle following the fall's municipal election, staff will bring forward a draft budget that will be tabled and ultimately adopted by the incoming council and mayor in early 2027. The content and structure of this report is consistent with prior years. Rather than reviewing the report all at once, I'll move through each section in turn, pausing along the way and giving the committee the opportunity to ask any questions. So with that, I'd like to begin in updating council on where things stand with the town's audits. The 2024 audit is nearing completion. with only a limited number of items outstanding at the moment. And we anticipate that we're going to wrap up the financial statements later this fall. Based on the information available, staff are projecting a modest deficit of roughly $61,000 for 2024. For 2025, work has been underway since the start of the year, and that audit is expected to follow once 2024 is finalized. And we're projecting a surplus in the range of $19,000. So as you can see, both years land very close to gross budgets of approximately $30 million, which speaks well to the strength of the budget process and staff's management of resources. So I'll pause there if there's any questions, or if not, I'll continue on.
Any questions? No?
So next is a brief recap of the 2026 budget, just as a point of reference. The total tax levy for 2026 was just over $60.5 million, representing a net levy increase of 4.14% over the prior year. Staff have also included, so within the report, have also included an annual property tax comparison, which measures the town against a consistent group of comparable municipalities. And the takeaway from that is that the taxes remain slightly above the comparator median if you look at that chart. But the gap continues to narrow gradually, and this year's increase is in line with the comparator average, and that was 3.74%. Turning to the process itself, staff have carried forward the visual first introduced last year that lays out the strong mayor budget framework. As council recall, the province's strong mayor powers introduced a prescribed statutory budget process that applied to the town for the first time in the 2026 budget. That framework sets out the defined stages, so the mayor tabling the budget, a period for council amendments, and the adoption date, each carrying its own legislated timeline. Staff are reintroducing that visual mainly as a refresher, and because it takes on added importance this year, given that the incoming council will be working through it for the first time following the fall election. Staff have also proposed a budget schedule that mirrors the approach followed last year. Alongside it, staff have laid out a few options for the tabling, amendment, and adoption stages, which differ primarily in the length of the council amendment window, and in turn, the resulting adoption date. Staff want to be clear that the schedule is presented for council's awareness only, and again, the tabling and ultimate adoption determined will be by the incoming council. It's also worth noting that a first budget of a new term has historically required a longer, more deliberate review, allowing new members to get oriented to both the process and the town's finances, and staff had that in mind as well when they prepared this. So I don't know if there's any questions. If not, I'll just continue on. So the fourth section outlined the potential 2027 opportunities and challenges. It outlines the pressure staff are tracking heading into 2027, and it remains consistent with the themes discussed in prior years. I won't read through each in full, but I just want to touch on some of the main ones. So uncertainty remains the dominant theme, driven by external forces largely outside the town's control. This includes the pace of provincial regulatory change, such as the Development Charges Reduction Program and the Buy Ontario Act, both which were introduced with very short implementation windows. It also includes the evolving U.S. trade posture, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, the non-renewal of CUSMA, and the recently announced 50% tariff on a broad range of Canadian goods, which places upward pressure on construction materials and equipment and weighs in on local businesses and tourism. Global tensions, including energy price volatility, feed into the town's fuel, heating, and construction costs as well. Inflation is treated as neutral this year and is anticipated to hold between 2% and 3% going into next year. That said, construction-specific costs are running hotter, with non-residential building prices in the London market up nearly 9% year over year, largely tied to the tariff pressures on steel and metal inputs. Staffing costs are also a notable pressure, with the 2027 increase currently projected at roughly 7%, or about 784,000, factoring in the cost of living adjustment, benefits, staff movement, and staff movement within the salary grids. Staff will continue to budget for wage gapping to help offset this amount for next year's budget. External services, which include our partners such as County of Perth EMS, Stratford Shared Services, Police and Public Health, continue to see cost increases that frequently outpace inflation, adding pressure to the town-supported portion of the levy. At this time, those 2027 figures are not known. Rounding out the section are the longer-term considerations of climate change, the town's disciplined asset management strategy, and growth, which has actually softened this past year alongside a provincial slowdown in housing, as well as the two-sided interest rate environment affecting both investment income and debt servicing, and ongoing grant funding uncertainty. And finally, with regards to our general budget discussion, this section is really an invitation for the committee to discuss any targets, priorities, or service level direction they wish council to provide that will help shape the draft budgets staff bring forward later this fall. Given the election transition, this input serves as a second purpose as well, acting as a valuable reference point for the incoming council as it begins its first budget deliberations. And staff welcome any direction council would like to pass along. That concludes my overview, and I would be pleased to answer any questions from the committee.
Okay, thank you for your report. Questions from council. Councilor Luna.
Thank you, Worship. I don't know if this is a fair question, but staffing costs, that really shocked me, 784,000 increase projected for 2027. Do you know what it was for 2026, the increase that we budgeted for?
Through the chair, it worked out to about 3.18% of the levy. I want to say it was around 318,000. So this is pretty much double. It has.
Is anybody else shocked by that? I'm shocked by that.
And through the mayor, it is a substantial increase, but it's a result of our salary market review we completed and adopted this year. So next year is the first full year of phase-in. So prior to the salary market review, you had a number of staff that were at job rate. So the simplest way to think about it is if you approve a COLA increase of 3% each year, at a minimum, your staffing budget will go up a net 3%. However, there are a number of staff who qualify for step increases throughout the year, and our steps are 4% increases. So you're always going to fall, your staffing increase every year is always going to fall in a range of COLA and then whatever COLA plus 4% is. So for round numbers, 3 to 7%. When we implemented the salary market review, it enabled more, it took a number of people off of job rate and created a new job rate for them. So now there are more individuals who have the ability to take steps up forward in the grid. So that's why you're leaning to the higher end of the range next year as we implement the salary market review. So again, that was done to maintain our competitiveness in the market and to ensure that we remain a 60th percentile employer.
Okay, further questions? Councilor Lucas?
Thank you, through the mayor. Again, and you've touched on it again, I think going forward, we really need to be mindful on that growth factor because it is such a lagging factor that you're not going to see what we're not doing this year for 2 years or whatever down the road. So I think, I mean, it looks like you've got your eye on that, but I don't think the general public understands how significant that growth is to our bottom line of our budget year over year over year. So I think it's well at hand, but definitely continue to keep an eye on that.
Councilor Luna?
Thank you, Bridget. Just a comment that the one that worries me a lot too is the external services, because being involved with the public health and Spruce Lodge, I know that they really have no control over what's downloaded to them via regulations and mandates, et cetera, from the province. So this is a big downloading concern, and we have no control over that, neither do they. So That's a big worry too.
Further questions? So I just want to make the comment too, there's been some discussion in the media about strong mayor powers and the budgeting process. And I just wanted to mention the fact that this council and the previous two councils have worked very hard and given direction to make the budgets more realistic. And what I mean by that is when I started in the chair and the mayor, every year there was, several $100,000 in surpluses. And we don't see that anymore. As the treasurer pointed out, the surpluses or the budget is becoming very narrow. In fact, my first year as mayor when they did the audit report was close to $1 million. And the public is very, very concerned about taxation dollars and so forth. So in the last 12 years, the treasurers have worked very hard to make the budgets realistic. One of the things that we have implemented this council is we actually have allowed for staff gapping and different things, which is not an exact science. But as you see, what we're seeing from the report, suggestions of, the budgets are very accurate and very close on a $16 million budget. If you're talking, under $20,000, I think that's pretty good. So the suggestion of returning to traditional budgeting, I don't know what that means, but I'm not a big fan of that because I think the process is working very well. I had to get that off my chest. Anything else from council? So this is very useful because it kind of is a check-in, and it's good to see sort of where we're at and we're going. And we've traditionally done this. I mean, there's been some transition, so we got away from it. It's good that it's again. So what staff are asking us is we've traditionally set targets or said, hey, this is kind of what we think. And I know that we're an outgoing council, but they are looking for some input as a recommendation to the new council, whether any of the council are interested in doing so or have thoughts on that. Now's the time to talk to our treasurer about that. And yes, we live in an era of a lot of unknowns, actually, and Councillor Lucas talked about growth, but as well, I mean, we're going into our period where realistically a lot of our industries may be affected, including some of our biggest employers. So it's difficult, but I think it's important to notice that, we're not budgeting with, big surpluses in mind or unrealistic numbers. I think that staff has been very cognizant of making our budgets very realistic. And I would argue, once we get to the auditor's report, very realistic. So, Councillor Luna.
Thank you, Worship. Are you asking for a recommendation on how far staff should go with the budget before the new council's brought in? Is that what you're suggesting? I
think they're asking, and I don't want to put words in Spencer's mouth, but I think they're looking for targets, just like we've traditionally done, saying, this is sort of what we see because of what we're up against. I mean, last year, forgive me, Spencer, what number did we set as a target? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I believe we set as 4%.
4%, yeah. There you go. And so I think that was kind of the discussion, and then staff would come back and said, look, to achieve, or again, I mean, they did better than 4% last year. It was 3 point whatever off. I can't remember off the numbers. I'm not having a good time with numbers this morning. But the reality is that we had seen in some big drivers, some staff increases and different things in our budget. We had seen sort of some crystal ball things. So they're looking for some direction, or whether we're comfortable giving direction. Now's the time to talk to staff and saying this is realistic. Councillor Pridham.
Thank you, through your worship. Just with the staff increase, if that was added, what would that be in a percent?
Through the chair, I haven't calculated that out yet, but that is a very preliminary figure, and I expect that number to come down as we work our way through the process. So it does seem high at the moment, but again, preliminary. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and I will be working with each of the departments to make sure that number is as accurate as possible.
Okay, then I find it kind of hard to give a number because we don't even understand what the costing for our staff is. If we did state a number, 2%, 3%, something like that, would that accommodate the increase in wages, And that would mean every other department would have to stay exactly as they are. So, yeah, I think it's hard to set any numbers without knowing or understanding how that plays out.
Through the chair, if we take that number based on last year's levy, it would work out to approximately 4.5% of the levy. Yeah. So if you want to use that as a baseline.
And to me, that seems quite high, an expectation for the taxpayers to absorb, considering what the environment is now, which is so uncertain for everyone, for, stability in the home, for jobs, for, whatever may unfold. And we really don't know. Maybe November will help indicate something. I don't know. But yeah, I struggle to be able to come up with a number, but I would like to keep it as low as possible, obviously, for the reasons that of the uncertainty.
Okay, thanks. Further thoughts? Councilor Lucas?
Thank you, through the mayor. Yeah, I would echo Councilor Pridham's thoughts there. Given that we're looking at that number of an increase at the wage level, I think we have to be very mindful. And again, I won't be sitting at this table, but I think we need to be very mindful of our service levels on a go forward. It's the next 4 years, I think, is going to be a bit delicate, to put it mildly, given what's going on. But I would definitely keeping that, you're looking at a 3 to 4% increase with wages. We haven't even talked shared services like Councillor Luna brought up. So yeah, I would batten down the hatches. Maybe that's a good way to put it, but you're really going to have to be mindful of service and watching those service level increases, and maybe some service level decreases is in order. But again, we'll let the next term of council figure that one out.
Councilor Howard?
Thanks, Your Worship. From your position currently, I know in 2018 the town underwent sort of a value for service auditing process, to my understanding, and I have read through that document. From your position, have you considered doing that for some of our biggest expenditures? And do you think that would be effective in this case?
Through the chair, generally when we approach the budget, it's usually based on zero-based budgeting. That will be something we'll have to discuss internally as we work through the budget process. Again, we're at the very preliminary stages, so we are going to have to look very closely at each department as we progress through it. But it is something we can take into consideration as we work through it, for sure.
If I might add too, yeah, I would say the significant value of the 2018-19 service review was the fact that it ingrained in staff the need to look at their budget every year. So I think last year was a good example that staff go through their budget every year, try and do that value for service review as an ongoing basis. And when we brought forward the budget this year, I think our net of get rid of staffing costs, but our direct cost of operating went down $200,000 compared to the previous year because of the actions of staff. And then, that's the reason and the rationale you see things come forward, like internalizing our turf management or our beautification program, because we found that outsourcing it was the way we're delivering it. It's still status quo, and the service level is the same, but the way we're delivering it, it costs too much money, so we internalize it. The challenge with the 2019 service review, we made some hard decisions, but not the hard decisions. And what I mean by that is what we really did was we sat around as staff and we identified every area where we felt we had scope creep outside of what our mandated services are. And there were small incremental changes made, best practices implemented, continuous improvement things that would result in budgeting reductions going forward. But the really hard conversations about service level reductions that would impact the community wide, they were left untouched. So, examples like Winter Lights, which is a beautification program, is wonderful, costs us, significant amount of money. Council wasn't prepared to make the cut. Things like in our recreation facilities and our recreation programs, cutting programs and reducing hours. We did some in the aquatic center for low usage programs. We didn't make the hardest decisions. So my view right now is that the report is correct. We enjoy a high level of service in St. Mary's. That high level of service requires a high number of staff. We still aren't fully staffed, in my view, to adequately provide it, but we do our best. A value for service review going forward, I think, is probably something that I can see a future council asking for just as part of the orientation process. My concern is that we're going to be at the point now where we're looking at the community impact decisions. So some of those nice to haves in the community may have to fall off the plate if we want to achieve budget.
Councillor Luna?
Thank you, Worship. I guess because we can't come up with a number, my recommendation would be that we tell department heads to really sharpen their pencils and come up with a list of those hard decisions that the next council can look at and start making those hard decisions and have something the best you can prepared for that new council. Otherwise, the 2027 budget is going to be into May. You know, it's going to take a long time for new people sitting here come to bring forward a budget, I would think. So bring as much of the hard decisions that you can and see where it goes.
Further comments, questions? Councillor Howard?
Yeah, no, it's just as a comment, I just say I agree with both councillors, Luna and Lucas, in terms of the fact that we do have to batten down the hatches. You know, people are getting hit at the gas pumps, the grocery store, you know, everywhere. So it'll be incumbent upon the next council to really make those hard decisions. And yeah, I'm certain that they'll happen when we get there. So.
Okay, further thoughts? Councillor Pridham?
Is COLA something that is bylawed, or like our response to the COLA increase? Is that something that a council can look at changing?
I'll take that. So we have a compensation policy that speaks to how we calculate COLA. Each year, it has to be reviewed and approved by council as part of the budget process. So again, talking in minor to extreme measures, things I've seen municipalities do before, and your policy gives you this flexibility, is to review what COLA is and then opt to reduce it to less than what the policy says. And so this seated council has done that. If you recall, during the COVID years when inflations were at 6-7% and we saw our neighbors providing 6, 7, 8, 9% increases based on COLA, we kept it at 3%. So you have that option. On the very extreme end of things, especially in those first few years of a new council, I have seen councils across the province put wage freezes in place. That's not something, again, you have to be, again, it's a balancing act of being very mindful. If you think of your strategic plan, in your strategic plan you gave us direction to say, be a good employer, treat staff as critical social infrastructure to deliver the services that make the town worth living in. So you have to be a competitive employer, and we know that we're in a difficult market with larger centers that we don't compare ourselves against, but we compete against. But on the other hand, you want to have fiscal responsibility. So I will admit, staffing is always going to be a challenge in St. Mary's because of that. We have services here that aren't typical of a community of our size. And we all know what those services are, and I don't need to list them, but to run those services, you have to have staff, and you have to have qualified staff that cost you dollars. So it's reducing staffing costs is not simple without putting in some of those cost reduction measures, like moving away from COLA or putting in wage freezes. But I think it's also the reason why we find it very difficult to add new staff positions. So there are many times at council you'll hear, you heard a presentation a few weeks ago from our community outreach worker that there's lots of work, it'd be nice to have more help. But how do you provide that help when you know you're already providing $750,000 of increase to staff just at their baseline? So I always make it a high test for staff to have an approval to add a new staff member. And the internal threshold that we typically use is that if you want to add an extra staff member or more resources, you need to find the equivalent reduction in your budget. It's been very rare that we've added net new staff, with the exception of being through organizational reviews that tell us we have to because for risk reasons, or through funded positions that we know we have a funding source for. So it's again, staffing here in this community, it's always been a delicate conversation. We know that we sometimes are considered to have too many staff. We always contend that we have just enough staff, maybe just too few staff to run the services. but it's very, again, very, very difficult to see staffing increases in this community, and we will always be mindful of that. So as I'm thinking of, I'm listening to what you're saying here, and I know it's difficult for this council to give a target, but what happens at the start of every budget process is I write a note to a senior staff and give them their budget instructions. And it's always, use a continuous improvement mindset, so that won't change. What we bring forward to the new council, or actually not the new council, to the new strong mayor, will be a status quo budget. So we never budget for service level increases unless we've had specific direction from council. So we won't be budgeting for service level increases. And as it surrounds staff, it'll likely be a direction not to add any new staff positions in 2027, just to being mindful of the fact that we have this significant increase coming through the salary review. And we have to have balance. The salary review is a good thing. It provides us some competitiveness as an employer, but the balance and trade-off of that is that we'll have to suffer through maybe higher workloads or feeling like we have reduced capacity in our days to work and set aside the want for new positions.
Okay, well, my number's not 0, in case anyone's curious, actually. But I think that we have to be realistic, and I just have one more. I want to follow up on Councillor Luna's point, if I can, is if you've had any preliminaries from external services, because I think it's important that the publics understand. We're probably looking at 2% because of staff, and I could be a little light on that. And external services have been as much as a point or a point and a half sometimes, actually. So there are things like a $36 million police station that's eventually going to trickle down. There's things like a conservation authority merger that there's going to be costs that are eventually going to trickle down. There's things, to Councillor Luna's point, the health unit and a bunch of unknowns that are going to trickle down. The CEO and I met with the ambulatory services, and they're looking at doing some studies for growth, and we are looking at some growth projects in St. Mary's, and I was quite surprised at some of the numbers in terms of responses and so forth. So they sort of came with hat in hand looking at how much you're willing to spend. That was the tone I got from the message, and the message back from staff and myself was like, not a lot. The reality is because we are continuously getting downloaded all the time, and I've spoken about it and so forth. But just, Spencer, have you had any sense of increases? I know that the treasurer's talk and so forth, or where we're at, because it is a significant amount on our tax levy, and I think that everyone needs to be clear and realistic about that. I mean, it'd be easy for me to say everyone go to 0, right? And it would be very painful. But the reality is we do need to provide services. We're in the service business, and if we're starting from a position where we're at 3.5, which I think we are looking forward, actually. I mean, I don't have the wisdom of a traditional budget, apparently, but the reality is that's probably where we're at, and if you get a sense of where things are going.
Through the chair, I haven't had any of those discussions as of yet in terms of where things are at, but I know they are fighting the same pressures we are, and I know their goal is to keep it as low as possible. If I were to anticipate anything at the moment, last year between policing and external services, it was about 2.5% of our levy. I would expect that number to jump up slightly this year, but again, I don't have any ballpark at this time based on discussions I've had. So
that's very helpful. I was a little low, actually. So I just think it's important that council and the new council especially understand the pressures we are under, and our costs continue to escalate in many areas, and every time we turn around, and we can even talk about simple things. One of the most recent ones was Partners in Employment closed, and we have external providers, and what do they want? To get them back and to provide the service, because we have to provide space. There's a cost to that. Like it just goes on and on and on. And one of the most frustrating things during my time has been the continuous downloading. It's easy when you have a revenue model that your taxation grows with the economy, right? So there's a lot of room for error. Our base is either user fees, which is after tax dollars from people, or taxation on property taxes. And we are continuously providing services and being forced to do things like the community resource worker, like we talked about, to help in our communities because the other levels of government have not provided funding. So it's, the town has been pretty resilient, and I feel pretty confident on the way out the door that we have pretty good staff that have come up with solutions, and I can talk about numerous examples through the budgeting process that I've been involved with. There has been innovation, and the CEO mentioned the you know, bringing in internally the grass cutting and maintenance, which I believe has worked quite well. So staff are continues looking at things. But there may be a period, and it may not be 27, maybe 28, 29, we don't know what the crystal ball has, that we will have to look at services again. And the first time when we went through it and we cut a number of services, and some of them were small, and some of them I still hear about. How come there isn't a morning swim? Blah, 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 blah. You know, I mean, I can't, you know, I still hear about that years later, you know, and simple things that were, you know, painful to certain members. You know, council may be in a position to have to look at that again. But on the reality, we have a very good tax base, very good business. We have a staff that have been very ingenuitive, in my opinion, and flexible. So I don't think we want to set the tone that, you know, the ship is sinking or be very negative, because the reality is we are small and we are innovative, and we have a very solid, in spite of what some other people say, I think we have a very solid budgeting process, which everyone was involved with, by the way. It wasn't my budget, in spite of what the legislation says. I follow the legislation. There's a lot of people that misunderstand it, including some of them that are running for mayor. The reality is that we work together as a team, and the outcome has been quite good. So I understand the hesitancy to provide a number, but I just want to make the point that realistically there is a number already, and it's probably above 3%. Unless you know we want less police presence, unless we want different things that we feel is important. So I think it's important that we know that we don't know what the growth number is, and it's a moving target. But the reality is that we're going to land somewhere over that number. I think, depending on, and hey, the new mayor might be a genius and throw something on the table that none of us thought of, but I don't know. Further comments, questions? Councilor Luna?
Thank you, Worship. Just a question, is that enough to get you started? And
Through the chair, yeah, that's helpful. I guess staff have always operated under the mindset of looking at their budgets very closely and making sure they're as accurate as possible and as realistic as possible. So I would say a target of we'll be aiming for in between 4 to 5%, somewhere in there, just given where the numbers are at this moment. And then if we have to go down from there, then we'll have to take another look at the services that we're offering.
Okay. Questions? So I'm not getting the sense anyone wants to pick a number, but I'm Councilor Luna.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not happy with hearing 5%. The only thing we can control is our internal budgets. We can't control the downloading with the external budgets and all of that. We all know that. So again, we really need to sharpen our pencils and come up with the best, lowest budget we can. And then the rest gets added in, and it is what it is. But we have to start with that really low base, is all I have to say.
Councilor Howard?
I think it's just like Councilor Pridham had said, is inevitably we're going to have to wait for the next council and see how they feel about specifically that number and that target, because no matter what, they might decide that we have to make those hard decisions early, so.
Okay, then I'm open for a motion, but I'm assuming we're just going to receive the report. So would you move that? Do you mind just moving that? Just be received. Yeah.
So I would move that the FIN 19-2026 pre-budget 2027 be received.
Okay. Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councilor Alward. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you for your report, Spencer. Much appreciated. Okay, should we take 5 minutes here before we move on to the fire chief's report? Okay, we'll reconvene then. Today we have our Director of Emergency Services, Chief Phil West, who's going to present a fire master plan for council's consideration. Chief West, thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having me today. Before you is our 26 to 2036 vision for the St. Mary's Fire Department. This goes through governance, staffing, prevention, training, facilities, apparatus, communications, and emergency management. As you know, we're kind of a all hazards response for the town of St. Mary's, from car accidents to fires, pre-fires, assisting EMS when they cannot make a call within 10 minutes or something's critical. We also do water and ice rescue and low slope rescue. As our population changes, the community grows, and we have weather factors. We need to look at our plan and alter it at times. I'm not looking, in this plan, I'm not looking to add any services that we do not provide already. Basically, that would be like trench rescue, high angle rescue, that sort of thing. So I think that we're in a good shape of the services we provide, and how the current council and previous councils supported the fire department. We're in good shape with equipment. We've got a good team in place. And basically the plan isn't about asking for money for, you know, this, that, and the other thing. It's just a strategic plan going through the next 10 years of how we're going to handle increased demand, prevention, public education, specialized rescue, emergency planning. Just before I get, and I've got a slideshow, but I just wanted to talk about a few things before I hit that. In the past, we've spent, in a lot of fire departments, the same thing. We've spent a lot of focus on reaction and not education and being in front of things. So traditionally, fire departments, all their funding is on suppression in that funnel, and I'm a believer that we should be spending a lot more dollars transitioning from, you know, the best equipment in the world and all that stuff to saving some money on that side and spending the money on prevention and education. So that's one thing, and just looking to get a few little things of having captains and the deputy chief have access to FirePro so they can put call data in directly instead of filling out sheets. And then for me to put it in, there's a bit of cost savings that it doesn't have to be downloaded to the chief all the time. They can have a laptop available to them in the old dispatch room and enter in the data directly instead of writing it down. And basically, that would just leave me from checking over the reports and entering them in, or finishing and everything. We want to continue with health and wellness through cancer prevention, peer support, our buddy system, proper cleaning and decom practices, and keep educating our new members and existing members about cumulative stress, how to handle that, and just supporting one another. So, facility upgrades, I had a section in there. It's come up for previous years, but there is a problem with our bunker gear room. It's not ventilated well enough. I'm hoping to get that procured in our grant this year. So I'm working with Spencer. Hopefully we can submit that over the next couple of days, and hopefully part of that upgrade is going to solve that problem. We will be looking at getting some backup spare bunker gear that's not over 10 years old too in that grant. We're also looking for fencing to be added. There's a safety concern with individuals cutting through, mostly children, cutting through the fire hall parking lot to the skate park, and I think with adding fencing along the back there will stop that people cutting in. There has been some close calls, especially when the police were using the fire hall too, where they were backing up and there was a child that was cutting through the park. So I think that would be helpful. I also have in there for reflective film on the front doors. It's quite hot in the fire hall in the summertime, and I think the reflective film would cut down that heat for when we're practicing in the bays in June, July, August, and doing our truck checks. In my report, one of the bigger things is looking for a training officer. As you know, in previous meetings, it's come up that us as a fire department, we have to do the same training that a full-time fire department does, and we have the same obligations and legislation. If we were, a big fire department like, say, Mississauga, they have the same. We're working the same parameters they are. So training is very important. Developing and following our SOGs with our training is very important, and having lesson plans, safety plans. We've involved there quite a bit through the last year with safety plans, lesson plans that we haven't had previous, but it does it is quite a burden to do this. And I think if we had a part-time training officer, hopefully it would be somebody that would step up internally 4 to 6 hours a week, could develop these plans, make sure all the sign-offs are done, work with myself in upgrading our SOGs, making sure the firefighters sign off on the SOGs, standard operating guidelines for, talking fire terms. But it would be fairly helpful. We could also, with the training officer, we could also identify up-and-comers that individual might see potential, a little bit more potential in future officers. We could spend some time directing more officer training from it, and basically working on some succession stuff when we see that someone's interested in being a future lieutenant, a future captain, a future deputy chief. So I think that position would be helpful with that. One of the things in the fire master plan is to upgrade our regulating bylaw 78/2019. Currently, the structure needs to be updated from the previous one. It's in the fire master plan of the lieutenants, captains, that order. And the other thing that needs to be updated, that I'm recommending to update, is we had permission from council to be ice rescue, and then I think there should be a separate line point that we offer life safety ice rescue as a service. Basically anything that's, as like I said, this is a 10-year master plan. I kind of kept financials out of it. I just wanted to focus, like a lot of traditional fire master plans, on where we need to go and where we need to fill in the gaps. So anything that staff level increase, operating or capital initiatives, obviously that's something the fire department is going to come back with specific reports that outline the training officer position or a public educator position, it would be coming back to council for approval and with budgeting numbers. Any recommendations you see fit that hopefully we put in place, and then we annually report back about how we're doing with those new recommendations and stuff. So through the report, at the back of the report, there's lots of suggestions. There's 60 in total. Some of them are just renewing what we already do, and then there's ones that we're looking at doing immediately within the next 1 to 3 years, and then ones that are down in that 7 to 10 year range. So basically, the plan is in front of you now. Our last plan was in 2019. Obviously, with leadership change, it's probably a good idea to bring a new plan to the mayor and council. So we've done that today. Basically, it defines the service that we provide currently, if we have to provide other services, and basically it goes through an outline of weather change patterns, population change, growth in industry, growth in residential, looking at adding additional long-term care facilities, that sort of thing it's going to up call volume. All set, Jenna, on that next one. Basically, it sets the direction over the next 10 years, defining service and funding to provide services. We're assessing the risk. That's on an annual basis. We're always looking at its incident types, demographic changes, municipal growth, and hazard mitigation. And like I was saying previous, that's a big thing that we need to do a better job in the fire service, is being proactive instead of reactive. So milestones are what I spoke about before of, year 1, 3 to 5 years, and 7 to 10 years. And just to keep looking at our fire master plan to see if there needs to be any modifications. Next slide. So the fire department has been around since 1857 in St. Mary's. Currently, our structure is 8 officers, including the chief, part-time fire prevention, plus our on-call firefighters. The officer, other than the chief and the deputy chief, we have 3 captains and 3 lieutenants, which gives us a good ratio for officers to firefighters. As I mentioned before, the last time the fire master plan was done was 2019. All operations report to the fire chief, which obviously I report to the CAO and council. And it's up to council to define the level of services that we operate. Next slide, Jenna, please. There is an error on, I guess I've been around too long, but I had a decade ago in there. It's actually 13 to 16 years ago was when we had a call volume of 55, so I want to make that correction. Since then, call volumes drastically increased. You can see in 23 to 24, we were averaging 160. Now we're approaching 175, 180 calls a year. In my report, there's a couple snapshots of where the calls are. The fire hall's in really good position in for response. Our average response is 6 minutes in St. Mary's, and I have Perth South number. Perth South is just under 9 minutes, which I thought was a pretty good response time for, so an extra 3 minutes getting out of the country, which I was surprised at. So average turnout 16 to 17 individuals. I want to make a point. The employers are great in our town of St. Mary's to let our individuals go to calls. There is pressure with this call volume of our members picking and choosing what they go to. So if we have a reported structure fire, those are the calls usually will get an average of 18 to 20, where an automatic alarm, you're going to get your 11 to 13. If it's repaged out as an actual call, a fire, we do have the appropriate attendance that we need. And obviously we have mutual aid that we can rely on too. In the call volume, definitely there's as CO legislation increases, we are going to see more CO false alarms and false fire alarms as people keep increasing protection. That's why the education factor becomes more and more critical, that we can educate that there's a difference between your fire alarm chirping to a full alarm. So lots of education needs to be done. Spending the money in education will lessen calls, and basically an average call, a minimum is going to be a cost of $600 that we have in a response call, that just for the wages and the fuel the truck's going to use. So that's on our basic average of 16 responders per call. We will consider an officer call. So if it's a CO call without symptoms, usually it's 2 or 3 officers that go, not the whole department. So there is some savings there. We'll continue that. I can go to the next slide. Governance and service levels, basically, as I mentioned before, about changing the bylaw, just updating the bylaw to our current organization chart that was approved many years ago, and basically adding low slope rescue that we've been approved for, and we're in the past, that it's not listed on its own, and ice water should be listed on its own as far as I'm concerned too. There's 13 members fully trained, and we're properly equipped for low slope rescue. And we've been training for quite a few years with low slope training. So basically, yeah, so we're asking to at some point to update that bylaw. We'll set. For pre-fire planning, if we had a little bit more help with prevention of public education, we could spend more time in a high hazard manufacturing areas, coordinating inspections, working with our firefighters, updating plans and pre-plans. We're still finding employers that we have not inspected in many years, and definitely those businesses should be, we should be inspecting them every year, and with proper inspections and bringing them up to date, making sure their fire extinguishers are in the charge zone, they're ready to go. Not blocking doors. It's a big safety factor for the firefighters, plus their customers and the people that work there. So with us doing more regular inspections, it takes the risk down, and it should cut back our call volume. Fire cause determination, we only have one that is certified to do fire cause determination. There's quite a few of us that are partially trained to do it. We've been around and done it for years, but not fully certified. So on a succession standpoint or extra coverage for someone that's If our fire prevention officer is on holidays, we basically would have to be making a mutual aid request, I guess, for fire determination. At this time, I have a dedicated educator. Right now, we don't have a public educator. There are members, including myself, that are certified public life safety educators. So all the school visits and stuff that we try to make sure there's at least one certified educator in those visits, plus we'll have a couple additional firefighters. That volume of requests has grown significantly over the years, having either going to the schools or having them there, Beaver Scouts, Junior 911 Day, being at the supermarkets and stuff, and it is taking a toll with the number of fire calls we have on staff, and it would be nice to have a part-time educator, someone to help with fire prevention as well. That's another thing that would be, they could spearhead a door-to-door campaign along with the school programs I mentioned. There's a report, a study in my report that talks about Surrey, BC, and they were able to do, they hit target areas and they were able to do, get proper detection in homes and stuff, and they making sure alarms weren't out of date and stuff, and they were able to reduce their call volume by 64%. So there are studies available like that success story where spending the money for proper education and knocking on doors to make sure that their alarms aren't past date, that they have batteries in them. It's helped. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, training's a big thing, and it has been a big thing for many, many years, and it just increasing the amount that we need to do on a regular basis, following NFPAs and provincial protocols, the Ministry of Health guidelines and our SOGs and our Section 21 guidance notes to follow, especially with cancer prevention. We're working towards having our SOGs fully completed, updated, and make sure the reviews take place every 12 months. We need to continue officer development with incident command, health and safety, administration. As I said before about needing to recognize firefighters that have potential in being officers, to help them grow, make sure they get extra training to have them succeed once they step up into a lieutenant or captain role. We did do a modification when I became deputy chief. When in the past, when we had a fire call, it was always the deputy chief or chief that took command. For the last 2 years now, it's the first officer captain that will take command, and it will be turned over to the chief or deputy chief if it's outside of their scope, or if they need to be active on door controller stuff. And that basically that gives them the experience when they have others there to support them. So in times of the deputy chief or myself not being there, they've been in command several times with us there to support, so they're used to it. And I think that's really helped our department grow on the officer side of things. So we'll continue with that because it's working quite well. Next slide. Just a review of the staff structure. This back in 2016, Hasn't changed, it just needs to be updated in our governance. We have a chief, fire prevention officer, deputy chief, 3 captains, 3 lieutenants, and we do have our fire chaplain that's a volunteer. Clear roles, management reviews, job description with captains. We meet monthly, the deputy chief, myself, if no one's on holidays, and the captains. And we have a full officer meeting at least 3 times a year with, that brings in lieutenants as well. As mentioned before, we have 8 officers to 17 firefighters, so it's a good ratio. I'd mentioned before about upgrading our some hardware as a laptop, a mouse, possibly a monitor in our former dispatch area for officers to enter the fire calls directly into our Fire Pro reporting system instead of writing down the calls and for me to enter it after. Thanks, Jenna. The fire hall, as I mentioned, it is in a good spot for a lot of our calls, which is just within a mile radius or a kilometer radius. We have the school, we have schools, we have major industry, and we have our biggest response for automobile accidents, which is just at the corner of Highway 7 and Elginfield Road. Plus that gives us a decent shot out for the rest of PER South calls, whether we're going towards Line 1, River Valley, or going up to Line 16 off Elginfield Road. To have as I mentioned, to have a response time of 6 minutes, I think is pretty impressive, especially for an on-call fire department. I mentioned our concerns about the fire hall, the bunker gear room. As I mentioned, we're going to try to get that put in with, hopefully get approval from the Ontario government for a grant for that, and looking for some increased fencing with around the skate park. Did we skip ahead one, or is it me? Me, sorry, thank you. Apparatus and capital planning. So our ladder truck is in excellent condition. Basically, we just did our annual to the truck, and we did had to get a 5-year mandatory test. They called it an NDT. Passed that with flying colors, so that truck's in good shape. The pumper, as you recall, when I was taking over June of last year, gave us some difficulties. The pumper is running extremely well now, so there's no concern with that. The command truck was recently updated. The only concern there is we need a repeater in the truck, which I'm going to try to put in this year's budget. I think there's room, so and that's a big safety concern that we don't have great comms sometimes if we're in valleys and stuff until Unit 4 shows up. For whatever reason, our repeater went into the rescue truck, and it's not a first line truck, so we have to make a little bit of a shift there to have a repeater in the truck that's usually first on scene. So the numbers before you for rescue truck and tanker truck was previously budgeted. I've reviewed with finance. There's many articles circulating. I brought 3 with me today about the apparatus. The pricing has gone absolutely crazy over the last couple of years. So that rescue truck that we budgeted for a few years ago, the 525, is now going to be approximately $700,000. And our tanker truck that was budgeted previous for 350 is going to be somewhere around 560. To note, aerial devices used to be about $800,000, $900,000. They're $2 million now. Basically, a lot of it's happened, but obviously with tariffs are supposed to be not on emergency vehicles, but they probably had a hard time dictating what individual parts are not being tariffed in that. And there was there was a monopoly created in the US market where a whole bunch of big builders bought out smaller builders. So 70% of the truck manufacturing made in the United States, I think 3 manufacturers now. So there are still, the great news is there's still Canadian manufacturers, but the pricing's gone up with tariffs and stuff. So Spencer and I have had conversations with that about basically making sure that we have proper reserves in place to fund these upcoming trucks. There's a lot of municipalities that have had a extremely hard time funding trucks right now, and they're putting spare trucks back into service, and it's creating quite a mess in the fire service. And the average time that it took to get a truck once you ordered it used to be about 18 months. Now some departments are looking at 3 or 4 years. And in some of the articles I've read that basically they budgeted to get the truck in 2022. They get the truck in 2024, and great news, municipality, your price has gone up $300,000, $400,000. So there's been many cases of that. So I wanted to highlight that problem that's not going to be unique to us, but it's a problem in the fire service that these apparatuses are so expensive. The good news is, again, that our most expensive trucks, the aerial, the pumper, they're in good shape. They're newer trucks, and they're in excellent condition, as I have in my report. Last slide, Jenna, please. Or 2 more, I think there is. This slide, funding radios and emergency management. In terms of what we'd like to do, and hopefully I can show at the end of this year that we're able to save a little bit on some things we didn't need, and hopefully there's room in the budget that we can spend more on fire education, prevention, preventing accidents from happening, lower our call volume, and basically it talks about the upgrades in a bunker gear room. One of the educational things I'd like to work with the building department is getting a sign that we can educate the public that faces the traffic north to south. Currently our sign, we can't reprogram it. We've had it looked at a few times, but I think it's always should have been pointed north and south traffic so people can see it. We can put education messages on there, as well as continue with the educational message online and in newspapers. The radios, I have that part of the communication point. There's no problem with our radios and things like this, and there's other things we can push back, but our radios are in good shape. I'll work on it budgeting wise to replace some of our batteries. I did have our batteries tested last year. I think we only had to replace 3, but our radios are very good, so they don't need to be replaced anytime soon. So I've pushed that back. The $22,000 replacement value that was budgeted quite a few years ago for radios being pushed back, it's going to be about $28,000 probably by the time we need to replace them, but not till 2035. Emergency management will continue to look at the services we provide, make sure that we're providing good services at a good value to the public. So we basically look at that, and we'll continue to look at that every year. I don't have to hit on the apparatus again, it's at the bottom there. And I think we're on the last slide. So basically, what the fire master plan, again, is to provide, it gives you a 10-year plan of what to choose, what services we provide, what you as council and the mayor see fit to adopt out of this plan, to prioritize things. And again, as I mentioned, it's my job to bring back specific items by your direction and hopefully find a way into the budget to have extra personnel expense without having, an increase that's more than 2 or 3% annually. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Questions from council? Councilor Luna.
Thank you, Worship. Is there a population threshold where the municipality would have to look at a full-time department? Is that mandated, or is that just up to the individual community, or how does that work when you go from volunteer to full-time? And is that something we might be looking at in the next 25 years, do you think, and we should be maybe trying to prepare for that somehow?
Through the mayor to Councilor Luna. It is a good point. Most of the municipalities that do have halls that are full-time and on-call, they're usually a population of 25 to 30,000. There is those departments that, a lot of those departments that have both, they have a lot of human resources problems. There's an attitude that your full-time fire department guys look down on the on-call side of things, and it's unfortunate. I think that for us, as long as we spend the money on prevention and education, I think we can control our call volume, that we don't have to be there in the next 15 or 20 years. But at some point, as it gets there, that, yeah, you're a municipality or you're covering 25, 35,000 residents and your call volume's at 300, you're probably going to have full-time membership. But I think I think the thing to do right now is to spend the money on education and prevention, so our call volume doesn't get to that point where we have to say we need full-time guys. And we do have a lot of full-time staff on our fire department that are firefighters elsewhere and on call for us as well. And they're just like all the other guys, they're all really good members of our team. So, and it's nice to have the other experience from the other municipalities. There's some good ideas out there, so it's good to have your guys from those other municipalities to give you ideas. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't see that, as long as we can control our call volume, I don't see that in the next 15 or 20 years. You might be right in that 25-year area, but hopefully we can control the call volume, that we don't have to get there, because I really think that our model, as long as we treat the firefighters properly and stuff, I think our model is there for success. And as long as we focus on retention, that we shouldn't have to go that way.
Councillor Alward.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just curious on that emergency management piece of considering a model that moves emergency management out of the fire department. I was just curious as to the rationale on that.
Through Your Worship, the rationale is, if we have an emergency, say there's multiple buildings on fire downtown, there's multiple flooding. Myself, I've got the experience of over 30 years of being on site on emergency, dealing with a whole bunch of different departments, whether it's hydro, Board of Works, EMS, police, and you want your most experienced people that are used to those emergencies on scene and not in a command center.
Further questions? Councilor Pridham?
Thank you. Adopt a hydrant, that's an interesting thing, and it sounds, I don't know anything about hydrants, but apparently those may be needed, and you're going to have them tested. That's the idea, I think, is to have them tested, all the hydrants tested for flow rate and that sort of thing, as maybe I'm understanding it. And wouldn't Public Works do that when they're doing their flush of hydrants to help you find what areas are needed?
Through the mayor. So the adopt a hydrant is out of the concern. A lot of the time the municipality looks at bringing somebody in or clearing the hydrants with our recent large snowfalls. So the idea of the adopt a hydrant part would be for residents and students to adopt a hydrant, dig it out on a regular basis so it doesn't fall on the municipality to bring in individuals to clear the snow around them. The second part of that is, yes, sir, I have an idea that we should be, when we are checking the hydrants, we should be flow testing them. If you go through a lot of big municipalities, even small, like I noticed going through Tavistock the other day, they have their rings on the hydrant. They're not very expensive. My understanding, there's about $28 a ring. Once they're flow tested, they're color coded, and the fire department knows what flow rate you're getting out of a hydrant. They're also reflective, so I drove through there. That was Sunday night, and I was like, wow, the hydrants really stand out. So there actually is an extra benefit of that. You can see it 4 blocks away where your hydrants are. So there is a benefit adding those rings outside of and allowing us to know how much water we have there. It's identifying them easy. I did the so I guess I think it's Ontario Clean Water does our flushing and stuff. They don't have the equipment currently to flow test them, but flow test kits, I saw there was a range of between 3 and 15,000 to have these kits. You can get an outside company to come in every couple of years and do bulk testing that have the kits. They range anywhere from $130 to about $400 a hydrant. But probably if we had the equipment, invested it in the first place, then it wouldn't be too much of an expense when we're already flushing the hydrants to check them, would be my understanding. But it is critical in the fire service of knowing what water you're dealing with, especially with a big fire for an industry. And we've seen cases where big fires in downtowns or hardware stores and stuff where they are shuttling an awful lot of water. And it would be nice to know ahead of time how much water we need to shuttle in ourselves to be able to get the fire under control or put the fire out.
Thank you for that. A couple of other things. The Fire Pro computer system, it sounds like something that you want to implement, and that's probably a good idea. And having education, maybe adult learning, or you wanted, education supplied by the town, maybe some sort of education program can be adopted through that. I have some struggles with hiring new people because, as you've heard in the previous discussions, the costs involved, and to absorb that cost through the municipality is something that I don't think we have the palate for at this time. I'm not sure when in the future that will be palatable, and to include it within an adoption of a plan, it kind of indicates that we're online or supportive of that additional staff. And I would like to maybe see a costing for that, but I would also like to see if there's ways that if we did hire, there would be a resource of money coming through the fire services. I look at the false alarms and the quantity of false alarms. There's a lot. Was it 58 for a fire and another 18 or something for CO alarms? And you're sending out, as you had indicated, about $600 worth of manpower per alarm that we are absorbing, that $600 per call. That is a lot of expense. And are we recouping any of that monies?
Through the mayor to Councillor Pridham, no, we're not recouping calls to, like our CO calls and stuff. As I mentioned before, our CO process did change. If there's no symptoms, it is just 2 individuals going out, no apparatus going out. So the cost of running a CO call used to be $500 or $600. Now it's $50. So yeah, but the fire alarm part of it, yes, we respond. There'll be a few trucks go. It averages 600. On the education piece, that's where we're going to see savings, a little bit of the savings back. I know spending the money to have an educator to spend more time doing inspections and stuff, there would be a savings of reduced calls. There'd definitely be a saving of less wear and tear on the vehicle. And as I mentioned, I want to take a look at the end of the year. I think that the way I budgeted this year, there's going to be room in the budget to add an educator and not be over 2% of what we spent this year. I'm hoping there's going to be enough savings that, and I do see there will be savings on having increased education out there. And as I mentioned before, there's a significant amount of calls we get for alarms chirping, not fully activated. So it is a frustration that we just have to keep, obviously with that education, and just like we do a lot of education online, but going around doing those alarm checks, getting those old yellow alarms out of people's residences through an educator going around helping the firefighters do door-to-door campaigns. We can save money. It would take some time, but there would be a lot of money savings if we had personnel to do these things.
Okay. The opportunity to impose a fee on, say, the fire alarms that are, significant cost to the municipality, maybe we should be looking at something like that within the bylaws as well and enforcing it, because the atmosphere, the ability, really, just the ability to absorb and continue to absorb expenses that are caused by another factor, and if they could improve their systems, that would save us money. An education piece is a great idea, but it's still the onus is on the building and that business or whatever that is to improve their system. And if it started to hit them in the pocketbook, they may choose to upgrade or improve so that we, in turn, would save that expense, but also recoup the expense when it happens. And that may be a way to support some of the things that you want to implement. But you know, it may be something you can absorb this year within the budget, but what about oncoming years for education and the support of that person that will be paying for, you know, with all of the increases that should happen every year as they become part of the team of employees?
Yes, very, very good points.
Further questions? I've got one. I just want to make sure that we understand some of the financial implications of the plan. And that's why, you know, I've expressed this to staff and talked about it. The chief has suggested, you know, a rescue truck's now $700,000 and a tanker is now $560,000. That's a 33% increase on a rescue vehicle and a 60% increase on a tanker. So we have run our fire reserve into deficit on a couple times, actually upgrading the department and doing things because we have a partner in this as well. So I think that, you know, the plan needs to go along with that. To Councillor Pridham's point, it's one pot, and, you know, it maybe can fit in with 2% as well. But when we're looking at huge increases on equipment, which we need, I'm concerned that the plan should fall along with a financial plan as well. Because, and I'll maybe ask if I can put you on the spot, Spencer, just to talk about where our fire reserve's at and sort of how we plan, and has it taken into account these new figures and inflation that's happening, or are we going to be underfunded?
Through the chair. So over the past few years, the Fire Reserve has been making sufficient transfers to the Fire Reserve. We build these costs into our 10-year capital plan. At the moment, for 2026, we're looking at about a $300,000 reserve fund balance. Factoring in the large apparatus expenses in 2028 for the rescue truck, we are going to dip below to a deficit of about $76,000. But after that, we anticipate that the reserve is going to recover from the transfers. And including the tanker truck, we expect by 2035 we'll have about $1.2 million sitting in the reserve. So at this point, I'd say it's healthy for the moment. But as we work through the budget process, we'll incorporate all these into our capital plan going forward, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had, and if I can, as part of the plan, is there different equipment that's going to be used? Because, you know, I often get, and I don't believe, but I often get in questions about higher density and higher buildings, and there's the suggestion from the public that we're going to need bigger ladder trucks and bigger equipment because of higher buildings. I wonder if you could speak to that, and whether that, you know, you're going to be coming for us saying, oh, we built a 6-story apartment building, now we need a XYZ truck. Or what's your thought on that, Chief?
So currently we have what's called high-rise packs. So we have the ability, the hose is packaged up and away with a nozzle to go up, whether you're looking at 5 stories, 25 stories, 100 stories, to fight a fire. So we're already equipped at fighting a fire that's well over what we have in town right now. It's not about a ladder truck can reach X floor. Ladder trucks are great if, you know, a 2 or 3 story building catches fire and you have a roof fire. But obviously in cities like New York or Toronto or whatever, that your tallest ladder truck in the world is not going to reach the top floor of any of those buildings or anywhere close. So as the town grows, and if individuals are looking for, corporations are looking for a 5, 6, 7, 8 story place, the fire department has no concern as long as it's built in the regulations of the town. And a lot of the times that these big structures will be sprinklered for added protection as well. So the fire department doesn't have any concerns.
Thank you for that. Further questions with regards to the plan and where we're going? Well, I did want to make one point as well, and maybe it's not fair, but I've always believed that public education should be funded by the province because it would set a common standard along. And you know, I know it's been talked about amongst a lot of my peers and at different conventions as well, but the reality is that, as we've seen in dealing with our partner, is that not everyone wants to maintain the same standard in terms of fire protection and education. I shouldn't say fire protection, I should say education. So to me, it's something that should be uploaded to the province, but the chances of that are probably pretty slim. But it would make sense, because the reality is what you're asking for in this plan, to me, is again another download. Just to be clear where I'm at, I'm not saying that a future council shouldn't consider it. I'm saying I feel pretty strongly that there should be a standard of public education throughout the province, set by the province, funded by the province. That, I feel pretty strongly about that. Anything else with regards to the plan? Councillor Pridham.
I'm going to suggest that we change maybe that the council adopt the St. Mary's Fire Master Plan, and say that there's a report back to council on the financial obligations that would be incurred with this if we choose to adopt. So before we decide, we know what we're looking at financially.
Okay, do you want to put that on the floor? I'll maybe ask you to put something in if you don't mind.
I don't
please.
That.
You can just do the third one if you want, Councillor Pridham. If you want to leave the other two the same, that's fine.
Oh, that.
And it'd be staff that would report back, I'm assuming, yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to read it? I just said that staff report back on the financial implications of adopting this St. Mary's Fire Master Plan.
And I'm just, to the next council, is that your intention, or to this
Oh.
council? Just to be clear, because.
I hadn't considered that. I would imagine to the next council.
What's your motion? I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
The implication
I
is clear
don't
for
think
staff.
that we could possibly have
I don't
that.
either, that's why I brought it
No, no. Okay, to the next council on the financial implications.
Okay, so if everyone's okay, so the Councillor Pridham is moving that Fire Report FD 11-2026 Fire Master Plan be received, and that the Strategic Priority Committee recommends to Council that staff report back to the next Council on the financial implications of adopting this St. Mary's Fire Master Plan. Moved by Councillor Pridham. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Luna. Jenna, did you get that okay? Is that okay? Questions with regards to the motion? Chief, did we miss anything? I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to, before the motion came with regards to the report. Was there something else you wanted to comment on with regards to the report?
Back to the mayor, no, I think that covers things.
Okay.
If there's no further questions, then
I don't think so. Okay, is everyone okay?
thank you, everybody, for your time.
Okay, thank you, Chief West. Okay, if there's nothing further, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. So then, under upcoming meetings, I have September 15th would be our next strategic priorities. And if there's nothing else, is there anything else we've missed? Then the motion would be that this meeting be adjourned at 11:30 a.m. Someone willing to move that motion? Maybe Councillor Alward, second by Councillor Lucas. All in favor? Motion's carried. So Jenna, in terms of adjourning, where are we at with just? Okay. Why don't we say 12:15? Would that be okay? Or what have you told staff? Just so I'm fair for staff, Brent, or?
We have the ability to tell staff anything very quickly. So if you decide on, if you decide on 12:15, we'll just make everybody.
Is 12:15 okay?
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay. All right, we'll do. Good. Perfect.